here I have my CG scale set up, so I can show you gents on the camera what the older unit looked like. So I've got my older chaser here, still the one with the tubular kind of frame built, and with the pod attached. I'll be using the same wing for the new build, and I am running a 2-cell 300 milliamp hour battery, and I'm running 4 KST the X06 servos. That's why I'm running a 2-cell, so that I get very similar torque to what you guys are getting with the X08s with a single cell. So I'm just fitting my nose cone, as that is kind of flying conditions, kind of all up flying weight, and just making sure everything is nice and centered. And I'll just quickly punch in there for you guys. So if you can't see that, I am at 292 grams and my CG is at 63.9, so almost 64. I do know the recommended CG is 65 millimeters, so I'll be aiming to hit 64, 65 millimeters from the leading edge again once I'm building the new one. So just once again, this is just a look at the older version, so that we have a comparative kind of build weight, as well as just general overall performance. Just a quick look at the old tail. We have a very similar rudder. We're going to be using the exact same elevator. There we have the seat, the elevator seat, that was a separate glued on item that is now kind of built into the fuselage, and then obviously the round boom is now being replaced with a oval boom. Okay, so here we've got our unbuilt fuselage, the new chaser fuselage. This is all the little bits and bobs you should receive with your fuselage, besides the wing obviously. So you've got your ballast mounts there, you've got your rudder, you've got your pull strings with the little crimps, as well as the little guiding tubes. You've got your horns for your control surfaces. You've got the spring for your rudder control surface. Then you've got your carbon push rods, as well as the kind of connecting piano wires that goes with it. There we've got our shrink wrap that holds our service in place, and then our hinge tape. So all of those pieces should come with your unbuilt chaser fuselage. Obviously the fuselage itself has the body and then the nose cone to it. All right, all the little tools I've got prepared for us here is some kind of flat nose pliers, some round nose pliers. I've got a flash cutter, and then I've got just a normal blade. I've got a scoring kind of tool there, also just a scoring tool, pencil, pen for marking, and then I've got a half round file. I've got a flat, and then I've got a needle nose kind of round on there. And then generally I have a skewer stick just to point and poke at stuff where I need to. All right, so I'm going to clear the desk, and then we're going to jump into getting our hinge line cleaned up, scoring this side, getting a nice clean hinge, and then getting our center line so we can place our horn smack bang in the center. Okay, so yeah, I've got the rudder laid out. I've got some masking tape already kind of pre-placed. What I've done here at this point is I've measured out the rudder, works out to about 203 millimeters, and then I'm using the grid on this board, which I know is a good square reference. You can use various other square references, and I am lining up the joints of the hinge. So there's just a little bit of kind of precautions you've got to take, that you are kind of working square, and then I've got a reference of where the center line is compared to that center line. So just using that kind of reference there, lining up all my bits, and then what I'll have is a center line that is square to my hinge, and I'll mark out that center line, as well as I'll mark out the area where the horn would be, and then we will have a line to score, and we'll also have a line to line up with our boom. All right, so I'll quickly get these all marked out nice and square and straight off camera, and then we'll jump back into scoring the hinge. Okay, so here we've got our rudder with our center line kind of marked out now. We're now confident that that center line is square with our hinge line. So what I'm looking to do now is to have a look at these little corners, and just to assure that that buildup of resin and carbon there is worked away. So I will take my half round, and I would just open that a bit. This one I have opened up a little bit already, and there you can see it's just to create that little gap there, making sure that we have a nice open kind of V joint there. This side hasn't been opened. You'll notice that it's not there. Obviously that little rib essentially is going to prevent the hinge from breaking nice and evenly. So I'll open up this side as well, and then we'll jump back into scoring the actual line. Okay, so here we have our rudder. We've now neatly cleaned up those little corners. They are now kind of open joints, and we've got a clean straight edge to kind of work with here. So also we now have very visible kind of reference notches on the flip side of this. So what I like to do is now take my ruler, line those up, and then I like to tape down my ruler so that I'm confident that it doesn't move, because this is not going to be a one stroke operation. We're going to do a couple of strokes to break through that carbon edge. Okay, so here we've got the ruler now nicely taped down. I've made sure that I've lined them up with the notches we've created, and we are now going to score through the skin of carbon fiber. There is a layer of peel ply which is very difficult to kind of cut through by traditional kind of means. So you do have to take caution that you don't cut through it, especially if you're working with a blade. In this case, I'm going to be working with a fairly sharp edge kind of point, so generally doesn't cut very well. The other thing that I have done before is I have used the back edge of a blade, so that corner also doesn't have very good cutting properties, but it does score very well. All right, so we're going to start with a very light pressure. It's not about crushing through. You just want to break the skin. You want to break through the carbon without crushing the foam. Okay, so we have scored our carbon. The carbon as a double layup in the center, so take care to score a little bit extra in the center, and I'm going to lift the ruler so you can see the score line there. Nothing crazy, it's just to break through that skin of carbon and to take care that you don't crush the foam on the inside. Alright, so now placing back on the table, and I'm going to support that entire edge, and I'm going to slowly start lifting this up. You should hear a little bit of crackling here and there as the resin starts breaking. But that's a very nice clean score line. So our hinge is just needs a little bit more movement. You obviously keep an eye on all the little areas where it could potentially break off, and just support that and keep on massaging that hinge until it is completely free and moving. So you just keep on going a little bit further every time. You might need to score a little bit more if you feel you need to score a little bit more. So here we have our fuselage laid out towards the right. Once again, I'm using the lines on the cutting pad here as a guide for myself. Working on a large table, a straight edge ruler line with a square line on would do exactly the same thing. It's just a long reference of a straight edge with a square edge on it. So I've got presumably be my kind of center mark still on there. I will remark that. That will be dry fit, and I would then be able to kind of line up, make sure that that line there is following the straight edge. I can then kind of fit that, make sure that I've got it center there and that all of these are center, and then I would find my cross line and make sure that that is square with my cross line there. And then I can mark out where this gluing area would be. So this is so that we can roughen up this area so that the adhesive has something to grip on. And I would do this on both sides. I would then proceed to mask this up so that I do not scratch the rest of my control surface. Alright, so I will mask the rest of that up. I will flip it around, I'll mark the other side, and then we are ready to roughen up that surface for gluing. So here we have the rudder all masked up, ready for sanding. I've got my center line there. I've made sure that everything lines up, and I've marked where my gluing surface would be. I've gone ahead and I've sanded this side. You do not have to go to town on this, you just need to break through the surface or give that adhesive something to adhere to. So I will proceed sand this side. Once we've got our rudder mounted, we then have to cut a slot for our rudder pull cable to come through. So we've got the tail all sanded, ready for gluing, and what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little cut there at the joint of the standoff. Try and keep it kind of as straight as you can with the seam line of the mold, and then also fairly close to it, like I said, in that kind of joint of the corner there would be ideal. And we're going to place it in the center of these two locating points there. So I've got a Dremel here with a routing bit in. You can use various kind of cutting discs or other bits you may have, ceramic bits. Ideally you want to do a test on carbon to kind of familiarize yourself with the characteristics of your cutting bit. Once you're familiar with that, then you know what to expect. Okay, so we have our slot cut in there. You can see there's still a couple of fibers sitting there. What we're going to do now is we will grab our flat file, which is just a slight bit too large. So I'm going to resort to the needle nose, and then just clean up those edges ever so slightly. So now we have our slot for the pull string to come through. We will now grab our little control horn, and the idea here is that we're going to use the join line of the mold to line everything up as straight, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that little difference in that offset just to offset off my control surface ever so slightly from that center line, so that my pull string is a straight shot to that, so that there's no tension on this joint, so that is as straight shot as possible. So we are going to get out our ruler, we're going to measure our distances, and we're going to just offset a little parallel line there. Okay, there we've got our servo horn offset. We've got our horn placed on the edge of that inner carbon edge, and we've marked out how long the slot's going to be. I'm now going to grab a sharp blade, and I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm going to lightly cutting those lines. We just need to break through this skin of this upper surface, and then we will pick out the foam on the inside, and we will dry fit our little horn all the time to ensure that we are not overcutting that slot. Okay, so here we've got our horn all sanded down. I've got all the edges cleaned up nice and smooth. I've also sanded the edge where I want the glue to adhere to, and then I've got some rubbing alcohol. I've wiped all of these things down so that they are nice and clean and free of any oils. I will wipe down the rudder where I'm planning on doing my gluing as well, and then to ensure that we get a good bond there. So we will place our horn in there. We will ensure that it is square, it's fitting nicely there, and then you will use foam safe Sino to dab a couple of drops in there. You can build up a little fillet, make sure that that is all tucked in nice and firm in there. So we are going to bend up our little spring loaded hinge here. What I'm looking for is to find the length that needs to go into the control surface there without kind of reaching a point where it will damage the rudder itself. So looking from the top, we get to gauge approximately where that distance is, and looks to be about 5 millimeters from that join line there. So what we are going to do is we are going to place that there and mark it, or alternatively we are going to measure that out. Looks to be 30 millimeters should do the job there. So we'll have a even amount on either end of this leaf spring. We'll bend that 90 degrees so that we have the capability of folding our hinge back 180 and spring loading it all the way. You could do 90. I like to do 180, so it gives you a lot more spring. The spring tends to relax into its position, so even if you fold it around into 180 after sitting straight for a couple of months, you'll notice that it won't bounce back all the way to kind of 180. So I've marked my little marks where I want to bend. I'm going to grab my flat nose pliers so I can get a nice sharp edge on that bend, and this wire is so thin you could easily bend it with your finger, and then ensure that that is a neat 90-degree bend on a little reference mark, so we can go a slight bit more. Then we'll do that to the other side, and we will have our leaf spring ready to be inserted into our control surface. We've ensured that it's not long enough to kind of stick out and damage the rudder itself. This one might need a little bit of reduction, and then what we want to do is poke our holes, and the one is going to be close to our control horn there, that gives us direct connection to our control horn, and then alternatively you can have it going up or down on your control surface. So I've clipped that down slightly. What I want to do is I'm going to take my spring downwards, and I'm going to grab a sharp knife, and I'm going to find the center of that surface there, and I'm going to just place my blade, and I'm going to slightly give it pressure while I'm turning, and we are just once again looking to break through that surface of the carbon and the resin. Go slow. You can always make the hole larger, but you can never make it smaller again. Okay, so I've got my hold piece there. I am going to now try and push that as square as I can into this control surface, keeping my fingers there, feeling that I don't feel any kind of uneven bits forming on the rudder surface where this is potentially poking the skin of the rudder. Once again, this is one of those things you keep doing slowly. Don't rush these. If this pops, then the damage is done. Okay, so now we've located that one. And now what we want to do is use that as a guide. That one's already in place. I'm just gonna line those up, and I'm gonna just do a slight little scratch or score, just enough so I can see where I need to poke my hole. I will just fold that one up temporarily, and we're going to do exactly the same thing here. I'm going to remove this half of the spring is to avoid having to battle with what I'm trying to do while I'm trying to poke it into the other side. Okay, so what I like to do here is just grab a piece of masking tape, and we are going to open that up, and we're going to prop that open like such. Now we are going to prep our spring. Once again, just a little bit of rubbing alcohol, clean that up, maybe give your fingers a quick wipe. So on the Gorilla Glue, if you have not used this before, the general practice is to spread a thin coat, to give it a mist of water that then starts foaming, and you've got to clamp it. So in this case, we're not going to activate it with water. We are just going to ensure that we've got actually a very thin coat of this on there. Okay, so we've just got a nice bead there, and we are just going to poke this in there, make sure all of it's coated, and I'm actually going to wipe down the excess on that, because that is quite a bit of glue on there, and we definitely don't need that much. Okay, so we've got our glue on our end there, and we are going to just start working that glue into this hole. Okay, so I'm just going to wipe off the excess there, just with a little bit of alcohol. Okay, so now we've got that hole primed. We are going to do the same thing with the other side. Okay, so we've got leaf spring halfway in. We're gonna get some glue on the other end. You really don't need much of this stuff. It expands and it is quite nasty when it gets on your clothes or your skin. It sticks and it sticks around. It doesn't want to leave. So at this point I'm going to force this into the position, and once again we're going to work that glue in there. And then before we do that last little tuck, just going to clean that little bit off. And now we're going to push these all the way flush. Okay, so last little wipe down of any excess glue. Keep everything nice, neat and tidy. And then we are going to just tighten up that, and we are going to leave that to set. That glue settles, it'll expand, it'll fill all the crevices there, and it'll grip onto both the steel and the foam very well, and it'll have tension in our rudder. So here we have the glue that is set for 24 hours. You can see that we've got a nice little foaming happening on those contact points, and at this point we're going to remove the masking tape to release the hinge. And we can see that our rudder is nicely kind of flipping back. And what we're going to do at this point is we're going to check that those foaming bits don't interfere, and it does look like that one is a bit much. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully just shave off that little bit of excess glue there, so that is a nice clean hinge. So now we're going to do a little bit of prep to fit the rudder onto the fuselage. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some dry fits, and then what we're going to do is we are going to just keep this rudder from flipping open all the time. Is we're going to support it in a similar manner. I'm going to grab this edge. I like going around the corner. It just gives has good tension. And then I'm going to make sure that we get a nice, just a little bit of tension on there. And then once all of that's done, we are now kind of back to a neutral state. I've just got to open that up so that I've got the gluing surface open. I'm just going to backtrack a slight bit. There we go. Okay, so that rudder is now ready to be joined. Once again, I've got my mark, my center mark just sticking out there, and I'm going to follow my guide on my board here. And what I like to do is to do my dry fit to find a 90 degree kind of cross line. I'm going to center it up there. I'm going to center up my hinge to make this as square as I possibly can. And then I'm going to square up my fuselage. Once all of that is in place, I'm going to revert back to my skewer stick and a little bit of glue. So I'm using a thin Sino glue, and what I like to do is just to put the Sino on a separate little block, as opposed to having the bottle over the fuselage and potentially having a spill. Okay, so I've got a nice little decent drop of Sino there. I'm going to roll my skewer stick in there. When I bring the tip forward, got enough glue on there, it makes just enough of a bead to drip on. So this way I can also prime my stick, glue on there away from the fuselage, and then when I come in with that skewer stick, I will never have more glue in contact with the fuselage. Okay, so I've only glued the top edge on one side of the rudder, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to heat it with a little bit of accelerator to secure that in place for us. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by fitting my wing. I'm going to square off my wing, and I'm going to ensure that this rudder sits square with the fuselage. If there is any slight difference, then what I still have here is the capability of slightly, not sure you can see that, but I can still slightly shift this, which gives me a couple of degrees of movement on this rudder. And once I've got that in place, I will tag the other side, and once I'm happy that all of the control surfaces is square, I will continue to fill the rest of these joints with a slightly thicker or more viscous Sino, which will fill the gaps a bit better and also gives us a nice fat bead. So I will cut to some photographs of the aircraft on the stand, and then I'll return with the rudder being squared up and glued into place. So at this point we have our control surfaces mounted. You can see the rudder and the elevator both kind of fitted to the fuselage here, and we've got both of them spring loaded. So I have done the elevator off screen exactly the same way as we did the rudder. So both of those are spring loaded, and we are now ready to start feeding through our control linkages. So I will continue to prepare the control surfaces at this point. We will come back to the bench in a minute. We're gonna be preparing the cables so that we can feed the cables through, and then we will tape those down in place that we have them. We are also gonna prepare the two sleeves that the cable needs to run through to prevent any snagging in and around the ballasts. And then we will also be preparing the control linkages for the ailerons. So yeah, I have all the items for my control linkages. We have the carbon push rods, kind of left and right aileron. We've got prepared the hook, the aileron kind of hook, and then these guys is going to be the spring kind of retainer that fits over that little piece there and keep that firmly kind of locked in. On the other end of that we have our Z bends. And then other things I've got here is I've got some shrink wrap to kind of clean those up, and then I have some fairly strong kind of nylon string here. This is a very kind of a high impact string used for kind of ripstop seams and those kind of things. The best string you can use is obviously Kevlar string. We don't generally get it around here, but I do know you get these thicknesses in Kevlar string, and that is pretty much unbreakable. It'll probably cut into your hands way before you get anywhere close to breaking those. So the other items I've got on the desk here is the crimps. I've got little plastic tubes. That is going to be our guide for our cables, and this is a nylon sleeved little cable or nylon film little cable, so not a raw cable. So that has a nice kind of the nylon itself has nice properties for slipping and sliding over little edges and pieces. So we're going to go ahead and prepare these things. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with our aileron side, and we're going to see that our little horn fits, and then once again we are going to either sand this bit with a fairly kind of coarse sandpaper, or alternatively you can take your Dremel and just give it a couple of very light notches to ensure that the glue has some good texture to bond to. Alright, so the practice here is we've got a little bit of breathing room for the glue to go in, but we want to just support the carbon, and we're going to use the metal and we're just going to slightly break it open. I'm not sure you can see that very well. So I've just cracked it open, and I'm just going to do that on kind of one or two sides, and what that is going to allow is that's going to allow the carbon to open up and accept the glue a bit better and wick inside. So I like to kind of have even as possible. So I'm going to measure out approximately 5 to 6 millimeters in the steel, and then I have a marker to I need to insert it, and I'm going to dab a little bit of glue in there. And here you want to ensure that you've got glue in there that it wicks in. You want to use a thin CA glue, and once it's wicked in, we're going to grab a string, and we are going to kind of tightly wrap it around that to ensure that that carbon that we've split stays secured. So that is going to be the practice going forward on this. I will do most of it off screen. I will come back with a compacted part, and then we will do the little retainer kind of clip that gets mounted on the outside. Okay, here we've got everything pretty for the glue. I've got my carbon, it's broken a bit. I've got my control hook, I've got it marked out. I've got the glue. I've checked that my glue is running nicely, there's no clogs. I've got a tissue paper laid out for any excess spills. So I'm going to ensure to get glue all the way onto that. And then I'm going to quickly insert this. Give it a couple of dabs. Got a nice little bead there. Got my string. I'm just going to add a little bit of glue onto the outside surface. And as soon as the string hits that glue, it's going to set. So now I'm keeping good tension on the string, and I'm slowly rapidly back over that little piece we have there. That should do the trick. You can see we've got a little bead of glue kind of running there, which is a good sign. Try and keep tension on it in some way or form. And then I'm just going to dab a little bit of glue on there. I'm just going to massage that on the rest of the string. So here we have our little retaining little spring. It is also sanded and kind of wiped clean with a bit of alcohol. I'm going to place that so that it's inside there. There's always going to be a bit of tension there, and we want a good overhang on that, because that's going to become our little lip that catches our horn. I'm going to slip our horn in, and that's going to keep it in place. So once again, I'm just going to dab a little bit of glue on there, which should temporarily just hold it in place for us. And then I've still got my string on the back end of this that has not been cut, and I'm going to dab a little bit of glue on there, and I'm going to slowly continue my wrapping. Okay, so at this point I'm fairly confident that that piece is secure. I'm going to add a little bit more glue to ensure that that gets a sufficient amount. Okay, so at this point I'm at the back edge. I'm going to wrap it another couple of turns, and then I'm going to return on that. And my return winding is not going to be too tight at the back end, but at the front end we need to wrap our retainer spring. So we will keep on tightening that up again. Okay. We've got some glue there, which is a good sign. Means everything had plenty of glue while I was wrapping. And once again, I'm just going to give it another dab and just massage that into all of the little crevices of the string. So what I like to do is I like to bend this one back. Inside of that, you can even give it a bit more, bend it a bit more, that it actually has closed that gap. At the moment I've got a little bit of a gap there, but essentially that is just to prevent the horn from slipping off. So what I'll do at this point is I will just slice off or snip off these little bits we've got. That guy and that guy. Grab my skewer stick again and just massage those flat. Okay, and then this glue needs to dry. We can also give it a quick little jab of accelerator. That should help it. I'm just double checking. It looks like we've mixed a little bit. Alright, so we've got our control horn glued into the carbon rod. I've got a piece of heat shrink here, trimmed to size, and then at this point that just gets fitted over there. We apply a little heat. Here we go. A very neat and tidy little control hook. Okay, so I've got tissue paper here on the desk in the hope that you guys could see these little tiny bits a bit easier. I'm going to quickly demonstrate putting a loop and a crimp on the control wire. It's going to be a bit difficult to show you exactly how that works once we are on the aircraft. So this would be for the elevator, as the elevator has a hook, so we can kind of just create a loop, and the loop can be kind of attached and detached from the hook of the elevator. And then what we'll do is we'll feed these through the fuselage. So good practice here is not to kind of damage the wire. So don't be careful that you don't get any knots in there. Any knots that you kind of tighten up will kind of create a little crease. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the that it does crease to kind of create a little loop, and I'm just kind of keeping that loop under tension with my finger there. And I've got the little crimp in there. I'm going to give myself enough to potentially come back on there. So this is the new hook, and we are essentially looking that we can easily fit this through our loop. We could potentially go a slight bit tighter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a sharp edge or a edge just to give it a little bend there, just to crease it. And once it's creased, you can see that the wire will stay there. And now we've got our mark. We will fit both of these in through there. I'm just going to click that end clean. Okay, so I managed to get my 2 loops through my it's a bit of a tight crimp, so I'm not sure I'm going to get a third loop in there. But if you can take your loop and you can loop it back over the clevis through into the crimp again. I'm going to give this a shot and hopefully we get it in there. So after a bit of conversing, I managed to get my third string through my loop. I'm just going to double check my loop is still big enough to easily accept my hook, and I am going to tighten up this loop. Okay, there you go. So I've got a loop on the one end, there you can see you've got a loop on the one end, through 3 times. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle nose pliers, my round pliers. They tend not to crush the aluminium casing too aggressively, and I'm going to give it a good squeeze on places. Maybe 3. There we go. We can fit another one in there. Okay, so there I've got a nice crushed casing. Clipped all of my cable, and there is no kind of damage or cracks or anything on the crimp casing, which is a good sign. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my flush cutters and I'm going to cut off about, call it 2-3 millimeters. That little piece is still there, just to ensure don't cut it too clean and have it slip back in. And then for extra measure of assurance, we are going to dab once again thin CA glue just there. That should be plenty, actually. So what I like to do is I like to grab my little plastic tube and just ensure that there's no kind of sharp edges on the inside where my cable's going to run. So either a little sharp edge just to clean out that little inside on both of those, and then what I will do is I will give them a slight sand, because we are going to glue into the fuselage. So a little piece of sandpaper, and once again we're just going to roughen up around the center area to give the glue something to bite to. The glue generally does not like biting to the smooth plastic surfaces. So here we've got the aircraft on the bench, and I've got it on a little stand here that I can keep the tail off the ground and kind of continue working. So before we are gonna feed through our control cables, we need to fit these little guides, and they're gonna fit either side of the fuselage to take the cable in around the balustrade that is going to come in from the bottom end, and it's going to be located in this space. So I'll take a photo and put it up on screen of the internals here, which is quite difficult to film at this point, but in essence there is a little catch there for the balustrade pin. So the balustrade is going to come in and it's going to sit approximately there inside the fuselage, and it's got a catch on that tip. We are going to be placing these either side of that. So we're going to be gluing that up. There we go. We're going to glue that in the fuselage. approximately kind of there. So I will sand the internals of the fuselage once again, just to give the glue something to bite. I will wipe it down with alcohol. I'll position these and I'll place them with a fairly viscous kind of CA that it doesn't run all over the show, and then just give them a blast of accelerator. I will take some images before and after, and then you guys should have a very good idea of what to do there. So we have glued in our guides for our control wires there, and now probably comes the most difficult task of them all, is to feed our cables through our fuselage. So our rudder is going to go obviously from the back to our little cutout at our elevator mounting platform, and it's going to go forward to the front of the fuselage, and your rudder is going to be the one furthest forward. So you'll notice there'll be this little slit under the mounting platform there, and you've got another slit there under the mounting platform. The forward one of the two is going to be the rudder. Your rudder servo is going to be the front, then it's going to be your elevator, and then it's going to be your ailerons. So the only thing you need to keep in mind at this point is that if it's already created your loop for your elevator, that loop needs to be at the back side, and you are feeding your string forward into that hole for the elevator. So we've got enough kind of string. The other thing I have here is just a little hook. So I'm going to feed my cable through. I should be able to kind of pick it up here, make sure that it goes through my guide, and then I'm going to start fishing through these holes on the side till I get them kind of pulled through. So all of the best to you guys. I will not make you suffer through that. I will come back with cables installed. So here we have the chaser with the control linkages, cables kind of pulled. Got the rudder and got the elevator, and at this point we have prepped our surfaces. We've kind of prepped all of our kind of control linkages, and we're to the point where we need to start installing our servos. So I've got the fuselage on a stand here, and I'm going to keep it on the stand. I will just move it to the side here, and at this point you can see I've already done a little bit of prep on my fuselage. I've got the blue masking tape here. I've also done some prep on my servos. I've also wrapped them in the blue masking tape. I have those 6 kind of KST servos here. I've ground off one of these horns. The rest of these horns is actually creating a nice little kind of pocket, or a kind of a recess for the one servo to fit with the next, keeping them all nice and lined up. So at this point we need to dry fit our battery and our servos and make sure everything fits. So I've done a couple of dry fits. I believe my battery sits approximately there, and then the other thing I've done is I have done some prep on fitting my receiver here. So I'm using a fairly large receiver because this one's got a Vario built in. I do know there's smaller ones. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those. So I've kind of cut a little opening for these pins to go in, I've also shrink wrapped those pins so that they don't kind of make contact on the copper there, and that will just be held into place with a little elastic band to kind of keep it there. So nothing too fancy. The servos will go as close to that as possible. So we got approximately that much. So I'll do a little mark. We need to kind of be approximately there, and then same on the front side with the battery. I will do a couple of dry fit tests with the fuselage cover kind of going over, keeping in mind that I've got my cable here now, so I need to ensure that that does not get damaged. Okay, so I've got my battery dry fit. We've got a fairly nice snug fit there. That's looking good. So now we have our mark for where we can start with our servos. So keeping in mind that your rotor is going to be the front one, and you need to ensure that you're looking at what side that cable is coming out. So I know in this case mine's coming out that side, and I am going to take that away. I'm going to mark exactly where I need that servo to land. So on the fuselage, we've got obviously the tapering nose, which makes it quite difficult to know exactly where center is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that line that I've got there, and I'm going to measure out my center line and mark it there, and I'm going to mark it best I can here, and I'm going to put down a center line for myself to work accordingly. Got my line marked out, and I have also taken my servos and I've placed them in the configuration that I plan to kind of use them, which is the one kind of butting up against the others, kind of little mounting arm, and giving me a consistent spacing. I've then gone ahead, I've taken my vernier and I've measured what that combined kind of spacing is. Just trying to show you guys. I've kind of measured the servo to top of the other servo and what that kind of combined spacing is, and it just lands on about 21.5, and I've taken that and I've halved that, and I've proceeded to kind of go around. That one's actually marked incorrectly. No, my vernier set incorrectly. So I've gone around marking my halfway point based on the combined kind of width, which is now giving me a center line mark for me to use to ensure that once I place these, that I can line the front up with the line and the back side up, ensuring that my servo line is nice and straight, regardless of the tapering of the fuselage itself. So at this point, I've already got two glue on. I'm going to run you guys through kind of the third one here. And you can see I've got my servos facing all the same direction. So my horn is always going to be on the front end of the servo, giving me a good even spacing. Also flopping the servos kind of from one side to the other. I've got my CA here. Not even a complete drop. Going to give it a little drop like that. So I'm going to take my skewer stick and I'm just going to sprint that so we get more surface area, and I'm not even going all the way to the edge. And then I am using that one to locate it on this side. I'm kind of batting it up and I'm kind of lining up the line on this side, putting it in place, giving it a bit of pressure. we go. So that is not a kind of a permanent bond, but that is enough for us to kind of locate it and get all of its other fittings on top of this to secure it finally. At this point, we've got our servos kind of in. I've got my receiver kind of in place. I've got my servos plugged in the manner I expect to use them. I've got a fair bit kind of clearance, and I've obviously previously had these in craft. As you can see, the wires has already been somewhat kind of pre-bent. So there's one in there that is going to need a little bit of adjustment, which seems to be that guy. So at this point, I'm just tidying up cables to kind of ensure that we will have all the space we need. So I'm going to neatly stack all these, and I'm going to strap them down with a little piece of masking tape, just temporary, to keep them there. We fit our shrink wrap over that. But once I'm happy that all of these are where they are meant to be, I can now do one last little dab of super glue in between the joints of each, just to give them a little bit of rigidity, and make a connection between them, so that they're not only relying on the connection to the fuselage. Alright, so I've been fitting everything quite a bit. It's always good to dry fit everything, make sure you know where everything is going to go, plan ahead before you kind of commit to gluing down any of these things for final. I need to kind of glue down my receiver there. I've got also a little bit of masking tape there. I'm going to do a similar thing, just a little dab of super glue, get that in there. And then obviously we've got to deal with these antennas, because once this canopy goes over, I'm not going to do it now. Got the control surface there, but obviously that's butt up all the way up there, and when you get to this point, you're going to start slicing into these and getting into trouble. So I have made a little cutout back there, not only for the extra ends I've got on that side, but also to kind of feed these antennas into. And what I like to do is I'm going to drill a little hole kind of back here, just behind the kind of seam line where that and that kind of meet, and this antenna I'm going to feed it through the hole I made there, and then out the side. Yeah, ideally you want to have these antennas at approximately 90 degrees for best kind of reception. Also, you want to try and avoid having these kind of covered by the carbon. I know this is the best case scenarios with the carbon wing over the antenna, as they tend to depending on various flying, they tend to kind of go into a carbon kind of covered state, which is not ideal. So I do kind of tend to have them kind of pointing downwards more than kind of tucked in under the wing. I haven't had any problems with my connection. So once again, making sure everything is dry fit properly. So I thought I'll quickly show you guys my process of kind of drilling these holes. I've got my mark kind of measured, about 5 millimeters on that joint. I'm going to take a sharp kind of blade, and I'm just going to poke it and start spinning it, so I get a kind of register mark there, potentially go up to something that's a slight bit wider or kind of larger tip. Same sort of, just kind of spin that a couple of times. It's a very small kind of little register mark there, just for the I think this is a 1.2 millimeter drill bit to grab into it. I'm just going to turn it to the side, otherwise I'm not going to fit in below the camera. And then just start slow, making sure that the drill doesn't kind of wander off or jump off. and I'm not giving a lot of pressure. You'll be able to kind of crush this if you give it too much pressure. Just having a quick look, it seems to be cutting nicely. And it's slow, but we can see that we've got kind of carbon dust coming, which is good. Take it slow, don't force it. It's a delicate fuselage, you want to take care of it. Okay, there we go. Our servos mounted, we've got our receiver mounted, we've got our aerials kind of drilled through. Everything is looking good. We are going to do kind of final dry fits. We're gonna make sure that all of our cables actually go in there. Okay, there we go, looking good. We've got everything nicely tucked in the fuselage that needs to be in there. Throw a bit of light back there, you can see we've got plenty of clearance, and we will start fitting our servo horns and connecting our linkages. All right, so I have my transmitter on the side. I have previously had a model on there, so I've gone ahead and centered all my trims again to make sure we get as much of a mechanical advantage as we can before kind of going to the trims. So all trims set to 0. We are going to run our shrink wrap over this. I'm going to remove that one. That is just a little power lead that extends from my battery to my receiver. I don't want to shrink wrap that. I am going to do one last kind of cleanup of these wires just to ensure that we cut down on the bulk of this as much as we can. It seems to be good. We've also got plenty of room in our canopy, so I'm going to grab my shrink wrap. I'm going to see that looks to be a perfect size. Keeping in mind we've got to get our cables through there. It might be beneficial to actually pull these back inside, I think. I will have a little think about that and dry fit this, make sure that everything is working. We're going to start shrinking this, and then as soon as we have a nice tight fit on it, then we will start kind of cutting around our servos, and then we'll do the last little shrink, final little shrink onto those. Okay, we are ready to do our shrink wrapping. What I've ended up doing is pulling the cables back so that they barely stick out. I've got about a 5mm kind of point sticking out there, and I've got another 5mm point that side sticking out, and the hope is that I don't lose those in there, because that's going to be another fishing expedition if I do kind of lose those in there. I've got my very old kind of Black & Decker kind of heat gun ready on the side here. Still looks like a Makita just to show you how old it is. So we're gonna fit that. We're gonna slightly go over, and we've got about kind of 5 mils either side. So once again, I've got all the cables kind of tucked in there. We've fitted everything. We know that all of them fit in there. Once again, just last little kind of neatening those up, because this is going to lock them in place. I'm just keeping a little bit of tension on them just to keep all of them in place. Okay, so I would say something like that would be a good point to just start cutting those holes out. We've still got a bit of kind of shrinkage left in the plastic there. We can see there where it's obviously gone very nice and tight. It's clean. We'll cut out that little section for the balustrade. So once again, we're going to do a nice sharp little blade, keeping in mind that this plastic is still going to be moving a bit. I'm just going to start cutting open my servo horns. Alrighty, there we've got our servo kind of horns or servo mounts kind of cut open. We've still got a little bit of shrinkage left in the plastic, and we are now going to do our final kind of shrink on those. Okay, I would call that pretty good. You can see that one's kind of opened up a bit with the stretching. They do tend to open up, so you can cut fairly small around that. I would say that one was a slight bit too large, but I don't see any issues with kind of moving forward with that. So now we can see we've got the little cable just kind of sticking out there. This one might have disappeared. So I am going to take my sharp blade, and I am going to do a little slit there. There we go. There is our hole, and we are going to try and fish that out without damaging our shrink wrap. Okay, so I'm pretty sure, yeah, we lost the other one. So I will have to restring this. It seems like we have a bit of a problem there. Anyway, so we've got that one kind of through. We will have to locate our other hole here, and I'm just using my nail to kind of feel the carbon, and there I can feel there's the recess. So just stroke that a couple of times and you can see that the plastic is kind of denting in there, and I'm just going to make a little slit there for us to get our cable through. So I'm come back with the cable being pulled through, and we can continue with our servo horns. So returning to you kind of after I've got my servo horns just fitted on the servos, I've gone ahead and I've done the rudder off screen. So I'm going to walk you through the elevator kind of cable connection there. So first thing we're doing is we are making sure that we've got our transmitter switched on, we've got all of our trim centered, all of our flight modes all kind of neutral, all of those kind of things, and then we are going to power up.
Low battery.
We're going to have just the initial kind of warning on my radio there, and then now we are going to take some masking tape. I'm going to straighten out my elevator, and I'm going to support it with a bit of masking tape so that it stays in a level or straight kind of attitude. And then I do not need to fight the string on this side as aggressively when I'm fitting it. So what I like to do is the cable is coming out very flush the body, so opposed to kind of taking it up and over the servo horn, I like to go in from the bottom, so that line between the horn and the entry into the fuselage is as straight as possible. We're always trying to avoid any snags and any kind of hitch points and all of those kind of things. So here we've got our little crimp. I'm going to feed my crimp onto my cable. Then I'm going to feed my cable through my horn. I'm going to need to remove that horn. That's very tight. So I'm going in from the bottom, and then I'm going to go back into my little sleeve here. Okay, we are back. This little crimp just needed a little bit more attention than I could afford to give it on the camera. So at this point, my servos is centered, and I've fitted the horn there that is closest to center. I would then kind of go into my sub trims, and we're gonna try and trim that horn to be as kind of straight as possible. And the reason for that is we're trying to avoid any kind of mechanical differential on that kind of throw. We've got the elevator supported. We going to give this string a little tug on this side, so I'm going to keep it tight, and then I'm going to just ensure that all the slack in the system is kind of taut. Make sure that there's no kind of binding on any of these things, and that we are fairly firm. Gonna make sure that we've got a fair bit of kind of spacing between my crump and my horn, and then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to give it a crump. So just that initial crump should be enough to secure everything. Once that is nicely secured, I can then kind of remove it and continue kind of crumping the rest of this. And then once again we will be able to give it a little drop of cyano, and we are going to trim off that little guy there now. Let's get this horn back on. Okay, so horn's back on. We're going to get our flash cutter and we are going to trim off. I like to leave a couple of millimeters so that there is some cable for the crimp to hang on to. And then we are going to put back our little grub screw. So I'm just going to confirm all my trims there, and we're going to put this screw back. So what we're going to do here is we only need a maximum of kind of 5 to 6 millimeters upwards throw. So I've got a little wedge that I've made that, let me turn this around. So I'm going to fit my little wedge in here. That I only have that amount of throw, the maximum amount of throw that I ever will need kind of going up. So there you can see, and once again all of these will be trimmed out, so potentially you can give yourself just a touch more, and that will give you your upwards throw, and then the rest of your resolution will be kind of downward throw. Okay, so we're back. I've kind of sanded in a little recess into my wedge, just with around kind of a down some sandpaper, and that just fits over our little kind of notch we've got in the wing there. So once again, I'm just going to fit these in, kind of prop them up to, I would say, anything from kind of 5 to kind of 8 millimeters is where you want to be. And I mean, that is not a lot. So at this point I've got my radio set up, and I've got my 2 Aileron servos pushing the maximum amount towards the wing, which is pushing the elevators, sorry, the ailerons towards the top side of the wing. Alright, so here we've got our control linkages in. We've got our radio connected. We are going to put our servo at the maximum throw, and then we are going to make our mark of where we want to cut it, and we're going to do the same on the opposite side. So keeping in mind that we still need to fit our little control link, these guys. So that's going to go in there, and we going to probably cut about kind of 8 to 10 millimeters behind the actual servo horn, so that we've got some room for movement there. Alright, so I'll take these out again, I'll trim them up, and then we'll come back with the last little fitment on those. On a maximum trim pushing, and the previous setup, so you guys, I'll just quickly show you what's happening. So we've got this new slot in the fuselage, and with the movement of the servo horn, what I want to do is I want to do my maximum amount of deflection, but I want to line up that maximum push with that, so that it never pulls that up and start creating binding. So my maximum push on that level needs to be lined up nice and straight, so when it's pulling, you've got some movement going down in your throw on your kind of arc there, but with the push, that once it's at maximum push, that it kind of lines up with that, which is not going to create any binding in this slot here. We've got our rods trimmed to size. We've got our servo horns in with our little linkage piece there, kind of sticking out. So I've cracked those same as before, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just quickly disconnect the part. So now I'm going to manipulate the servos and the wing so that I can get that piece inside. Oh, just touch. Shy. There we go. So there you can see we've got the little connector piece in the servo. We've got it in there in piece of carbon as well, and we're going to do the same on this side. This with a little dab of glue on there. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to release this, and then we should have movement. There we go. Okay, so I'm not going to stress that too much. Obviously that's still a very flimsy bond there. I'm going to do the other side. Alright, so I've disconnected the back. I'm going to disconnect, pull the entire horn off. Now that the entire horn is off, I can carefully remove that. So now we can proceed to remove these all the way out the back again. So what I'm going to do is I am going to remove my wing just to make life a bit easier for myself. I'll remove those, I'll glue those up with some string, similar to what we did on the back side as shown previously. Then we'll put them back together. So here we've got the chaser reassembled, all the bits connected, we've got it powered up, and I've got some weight in the nose to counterbalance, and I'm going to put it on the scale first. So I believe she is a little bit nose heavy at the moment. So there we go, we're at 64.4 and weighing in at a total of 282 grams, which is not bad at all. I'll probably gain maybe a gram off that once we shave off a little bit off the nose. And then at this point you are ready to do all your settings on your transmitter, making sure that all your surfaces got the correct throws, that you've got your launch switch and your systems all figured out, and then start off with a couple of low javelin throws. Start slow, don't go crazy off the bat. You want to do a glide test, you want to make sure everything is trimmed out and it's flying nice and straight. Also, you want to be sure that you don't do your first discus launch at full power. You're going to do just a light little toss just to make sure that everything is responding the way you expect it to. And from there, it's a gradual build up to harder throws, and in no time you'll be in the sky.